All right, I think we are back live to the world again, so we'll kick this thing off with, before we get to our second panel, actually, you know, the reason that we do this thing, obviously, is to enjoy some beers and to have some great discussion, but we also like to support a nonprofit, a charitable organization along the way, and the organization that we're supporting tonight, that you guys have helped support this evening, is the Independent Beer Distributors Relief Fund. It was started after all of the horrendous natural disasters last year that impacted Florida and Texas, Hurricane Irma, and it goes to support some of the families that are displaced by natural disasters around the countries, families that work with beer distributors, that is. So it's a nice feeling to know that your dollars are staying in the beer industry to help families that work in the industry. So we're going to go ahead and call up Kim McKinnish from the National Beer Wholesalers Association, who's accepting on behalf of the Independent Beer Distributors Relief Fund a $3,800 check. Yeah, oh, sorry. So thank you guys for supporting the Independent Beer Distributors Relief Fund this evening. The contributions mean a lot. They go a long way. And this is, I mean, I don't even think we're a year into this fund, so it's great to be kind of on the ground floor of something and supporting a great cause. So thank you guys. And yeah, yeah, thank you. All right. Well, now for the main event. It's funny. I think I made a Mission Impossible joke earlier, but you know, getting this specific panel together actually did feel like Mission Impossible for me. And lucky enough to have Lester Jones from the NBWA representing the wholesaler tier. I know down here in Texas things can get a little bit contentious between brewers and wholesalers, and we're going to talk about some of that stuff tonight. I've told these guys when I was putting this together that, you know, we are all about just having open and honest dialogue and bringing people together, getting people in the room, having a couple beers, talking about stuff, let it get real. And you know, I think that's what this is all about. I mean, there's really not anything in our minds that can't be solved over a beer. So we wanted to kind of blend with this talk. We wanted to blend a national perspective with what's happening locally, specifically with regards to some trends that we're seeing nationally, just the way that the beer category is evolving in general, as well as the legislative climate down here. And there's, you know, a lot to be discussed on that front, and I think there's, you know, some interesting insights that we can pull from other markets around the country to help inform the discussion. So Lester is the chief economist from the National Beer Wholesalers Association, who's going to lend a national perspective to the conversation. And then we have two local brewers. So if you're from Texas, you know these guys. Adam DeBauer, as you said, I've been saying DeBauer, but Adam DeBauer from Austin Beer Works, and Josh Hare from Hops and Grain Brewing. Big round of applause for our panelists. I don't think we got all these mics hot.
Hold on a sec. You failed to disclose whether this was general admission, PG, PG-13, NC-17, straight up R, motion picture.
We checked IDs on the way in. Everybody's legit. You know, everybody can see this viewing.
I have a note from my mom.
Okay.
Says I'm allowed to do R.
Well, it's not a matinee, so we know you're not ditching school. These guys are also board members of the Texas Craft Brewers Guild, so they are able to talk not only about their individual businesses, but they're able to bring some insight from the 250 or so brewers around Texas and share some perspectives on what everybody's dealing with down here. So before we dive into some of the particular issues just in Texas, I wanted to get all of your guys' opinions on sort of the state of the beer marketplace right now. We talked a little bit about it in the first panel, but just the evolution that's occurring both in Texas and across the country. I'll start with Adam and Josh. How are things kind of shaping up for your individual businesses? We talked about the 5% growth for craft. How are things looking for you guys this year and Texas craft brewers overall? And start with Josh.
Yeah, Texas is a huge state. I don't think I need to tell anybody that. It's not, new news for anyone. A lot of people that drink beer here, and I think as was pointed out in the previous panel, the market share of that for craft is still fairly small as comparative to the rest of the state. But the way that I view Texas is, it's always been a market that's ripe for more beer drinkers. The climate here obviously lends itself well to drinking beer all the time. But I think if you look across the rest of the United States, the styles of beer that tend to be the most popular here don't necessarily align, I think, with every other state that you would look at. So a lot of lagers brewed here and drank here, obviously. IPAs are, as the rest of the United States is trending to, are going to continue to dominate. But Texas is a very unique market, I think, for all of us. Growth is something that is not as easy. We, Austin Beer Works and Hops and Grain, we opened in a very similar time frame back in the 2010, 2011 area when, I think when we opened, there were still single digits of breweries in Austin, and now there's something like 65 or so just in a very short time. And from my vantage point, I think Texas is still wide open for growth and will continue to be wide open for growth, but it is an area that is also growing in wine. Has not always necessarily been a very reputable place for wine, but I think continues to grow in quality. And the beer scene is growing as well and growing exponentially. So I think there's still a wide open roadmap for all of us, and I know we'll dive into a little bit more of the challenges that each of us face, but my view is that, if you're getting into the beer industry now, in Texas specifically, and even more so in Austin, if you don't have something unique and you don't have a story to tell, it's going to fall on a lot of deaf ears here. Austin is, for whatever your opinion is on the whole keep it weird thing, but we do really appreciate storytelling here, and we appreciate uniqueness, and I think the brands that you continue to see growing in Texas are those that opened up with a unique story and continue to tell that unique story and innovate and grow. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Adam to see his feedback.
Yeah.
So as they said, I'm Adam DeBauer, one of the owners and founders of Austin Beer Works here in Austin, Texas, and I'm also on the board of directors. Josh is our chair of the board of directors for the Texas Craft Brewers Guild. We represent about 250 breweries right now. That number's not perfect because there's actually a lot of brewers who are on the almost open or kind of still developing list. I got some kind of updated stats, and so we have nearly 100 in-planning members as of right now. So that's a pretty significant number, especially in contrast to about 200 open members. So as he mentioned, when we opened our business, I think when we were doing our pro forma business plan, there were 37 open breweries in Texas, 2010, 2011. We opened in May of 2011. I've got 3 business partners, and it was the 4 of us who managed the entirety of our business for the first year and a half of that business. I'm a brewer by trade, so I kind of come by none of this naturally and none of this easily. Made a lot of mistakes, a lot of missteps along the way. I think that my partners and I have certainly made some good decisions and made some really good decisions along the way too, right?
The 99 pack being one of them for sure.
Yeah, thank you to Amy for the shout out earlier. I appreciate that. Yeah, we did do the 99 pack. We like to say that it was our best, worst idea ever. But kind of to your question, the market nationwide growing about 5%. At Austin Beer Works, we saw about 14% growth last year. We had been capacity strained for a couple of years. We opened up a new plant mid-year, and so to be able to see that kind of growth in about 6 months of actual total time, I think was really telling about just how hungry the market is for quality beer. And I know Josh is capacity constrained, about to have a new plant opening up soon. So I imagine he's going to see a pretty exciting bump in growth here right about the end of the year would be my guess. So far this year, we're up 10%. which I know this is a question you're probably going to ask later. So we're up about 10% overall by volume, and in terms of dollars, through just clever marketing and managing our expenses and everything, we're up right now we're about where we were at the end of 2017. So we still got 5 months to go, 4.5 months to go, seeing some strong growth.
Wow.
I do think it's interesting if you look at the stats from last year. You can see that some of our largest brewers is kind of a mixed bag. So in terms of Texas brewers, and in that in the first session, y'all talked a little bit about the overall market here in Texas. Out of 20 million barrels produced in Texas, that number stayed pretty consistent the last 10 years. I'm talking about numbers that I got directly from TABC from the excise tax reports. So that number's been right between 19.5 and 20.5 million every year. Kind of goes up or down a couple of 100,000 here and there. Texas craft brewers, those 250-ish members, account for about 550,000 barrels. So 2.5% of the overall market. And if you look at our two kind of largest members, Real Ale Brewing out of Blanco, Texas, and St. Arnold in Houston, it's kind of a mixed bag. St. Arnold grew about 10% last year. And actually, if you look at it, I think Real Ale contracted about 10%. So I think it's indicative of the overall market that some of us, they're definitely going to be winners and losers looking forward. And that's not to say that anyone that I mentioned before is a winner or a loser, but that we all need to be really mindful that it's not just going to be gravy days forever. And I think we're keenly aware of that.
Yeah. Lester, we talked a little bit about the Brewers Association statistics that came out last week, 5%. Midway through the year, 5% growth for their member, their BA-defined craft brewer group. As you start to look at kind of where we're headed for the rest of the year, where do you see things shaking out for craft and for total beer? Can you put a somewhat accurate prediction on where we might end up?
Okay, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to take the long way around. My apologies, because one of the things that I think fails to get that we don't look at is just how much the economics and the demographics of this country are going to shape the beer industry. For the last 8 years, we've been living a great dream here. We've had 100+ months of an economic expansion. We're down to the lowest unemployment we've had for a very long time. I think it's down to 3.9%. We've had some great GDP growth. This economy's rocking, yet we're looking at a beer market that overall is down, 2% on the 12-month moving average, maybe 1.5% on the 6-month or the last quarter. But the economics and the demographics of this country are so fragmented. We look at our beer market and we say, gosh, things are so fragmented. There's all these different things around. Look at your local markets. Look at the jobs. Look at the wages. Look at how people are living and where they're living. That's a reflection of our beer market, guys. We reflect our beer market in the economy, in the demographics. And what's coming our way is absolutely amazing. We're watching 10,000 baby boomers retire every day in this country. Those people will be on fixed incomes. Think about what's going to, it's a small share of the portion of the population that's on a fixed income today. It's only going to grow exponentially over the next 5 years. That has that's going to spell a huge and profound change for our marketplace.
Negative or positive?
We can talk about that. Let's save that, but you put that aside and we'll talk about that. And then just think about, you're going to bachelor parties, aren't you? We were in Nashville. I think every time I turned a corner, I saw a crawling pub full of ladies on a bachelorette party. People are getting married. Guess what? We have instincts, and millennials have instincts too. They haven't been completely ripped out by technology. They're still somewhere buried deep inside them. They will form households. They will get married. I can't take credit for this, but we are headed for a very frugal economy. Rob McMillan from Silicon Valley Bank has laid that out very clearly, that they see it in the wine industry. They're terrified of the frugal consumer and the advent of a frugal consumer. We cannot stop 10,000 people a day going on a fixed income. And we cannot stop millennials from getting married and having babies and substituting what they do today for diapers and daycare. That is an inevitable fact of life that's coming our way. So when we look at this great 100+ economic expansion we've looked at the growth of small brewing, we've looked at the growth of high-end and closing the gap on premiums and sub-premiums and pushing people up to the categories. these things don't last forever. And when I travel around the country, I run into local markets. I talk with local brewers. I'll talk with local distributors and retailers, and it is incredibly fragmented. You know, we talk about an average down 2%, but you know, I talk to guys that are distributors that are doing well. You go to Asheville, go to Nashville, come to Austin. There are strong distributor beer markets and retail markets right now, just because there are more bodies, and more bodies grow those marketplaces. But when you go to Louisiana and out in the oil fields, you go up to North Dakota where oil is down and people are moving away, those markets are declining.
Right.
You can go up into the Northeast where people are moving out in droves because they're retiring, and those markets are declining. So we talk about an average down 2%, but that's, you know, it's like, what's the average between the NBA and the National Basketball Association and the National Jockey League? I want to take an average of those two teams and tell you that everyone's 5.5 feet. That's a meaningless number. And we are getting to a point in our beer market where taking an average is going to be very dangerous for us. So yeah, long way around to your question. Industry's down, and we see falling per caps. We see declining volumes. But what does that mean in this kind of market where we're so fragmented in a beer market, in a retail market, and demographics, and the economics?
So some of the markets that you mentioned, you know, just off the cuff there, seem like markets where craft has done quite well, and where there are a lot of craft breweries, where there is a lot of consumer interest. There's a lot of tap rooms. People are, you know, drinking at the source. Are you seeing anything in the numbers that would suggest that, you know, more developed, more forward-thinking craft markets are, you know, better beer markets overall? Like, how do you start to kind of piece the picture together when you look at, you know, places like Asheville or, you know, places that are just a little bit more developed overall for craft?
I mean, that would be a great econometric study to suss that out. I haven't seen any econometricians yet in academia really suss out how that works. I personally haven't done it. We do see, you know, rooster crows in the morning, the sun comes up. That doesn't mean the rooster makes the sun rise. That's just association versus, you know, causation.
Sure.
So, you know, we've seen the Southwest do really well demographically and grow. We've seen some of those southeastern states also along the band of the U.S. do extremely well. You know, some of those are good craft markets, some aren't. I mean, I think it's a mixed bag of results. But I think what we got to remember here is that, you know, there's a huge population shift, demographic and economic, that's unfolding in front of our very eyes. And we need to take our blinders off and stop looking at 6-week and 12-week and 6-month numbers and lift our head up and look around, because flying at 35,000 feet is a very different beer market picture. And a lot of people don't have the luxury of doing that.
And before we get into some of the other stuff, just, you know, forgetting beer for a moment, if you just think about the overall economy, where are we headed? You know, I fancy myself a very educated millennial who listens to podcasts. And all these podcasts would tell me that, you know, if you listen to a guy like Tony Robbins or something like that, he's going to tell you we're headed for a crash as an economy because of all the growth that you've mentioned, these 100+ months. And I'm wondering sort of what impact that might have on beer. Historically, beer has done actually pretty well in times of recession. So, you know, as an economist, someone who looks at stuff that's outside of the beer category, where do you see the overall economy heading over the next, you know, 12 to 24 months? Is there some sort of, I don't want to say recession, but is there some sort of downturn ahead of us, and how will brewers fare if that is the case?
That's a great question, and I'm going to go right back to the fragmented economy. You know, when in 2009, 2010, I remember going to North Dakota. I remember looking at the shipment reports where they were up 5-10% every month. The McDonald's couldn't find enough people to work. They had hours from like 12 to 3 because they couldn't find people. And this was, you know, the height of the Great Recession in the U.S. That, you know, oil was expensive. We were paying $3.50, $4 a gallon of gas. That fracking was going crazy up there. They couldn't find warm bodies. They couldn't pay them enough money to go up there. So anything that happens to our economy is more than likely going to be very fragmented. You look at the risk of a trade war and tariffs and how that's going to impact, you know, the Rust Belt of America, where there's manufacturers are really starting to feel the hurt, or the Farm Belt where there's, you know, guys are sitting on soybean and pork bellies and chicken wings right now. I talked to a retailer that was so happy because his cost of chicken wings are now so low, because they can't get rid of them, right? And so they're dumping chicken wings on them for a long period of time. I don't know if you guys know the nuances of the chicken market, but chicken wings were getting really expensive because they were really popular. Everyone wants the wings. What do you do with the rest of the body? But, you know, you can only make 2 every time unless you have some genetically modified chickens that can kick out 4. I don't know. Long story short, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to be the catalyst that's going to kick us into the recession, but 120 months, you know, is what we had. I think 2000, 2001, in that expansionary period going up to that. We're 110 months now coming up on that. So things are getting dicey, you know, and, you know, we need to be looking forward and thinking forward to how this beer market is going to unfold in the recessionary period. And I can keep going on how people drink, because I do believe that, you know, despite what your grandfather or your grandmother told you, you know, people drink in good times and bad times. That's about a half truth. You know, there's a little bit truth to it. We are consistent consumers of alcohol beverages. We consume about 2.5 gallons of pure alcohol. It's the shares and how you divvy it up across beer, wine, and spirits, and low end and high end, that really drives that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to just kind of tap onto that. So before I got into the beer business, I worked in specialty retail. I helped operate a running store. So we sold shoes and apparel and nutrition and the goos that you take when you're running a marathon, blah, 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 all that different stuff.
A lot of marathon runners in the audience.
Yeah. But, you know, to tie that back, so we opened our shop in 2007, right? Seemed like a fantastic time to open a specialty retail store, brick and mortar. But of course, you know, a year and a half into that, realized that it was a terrible time. And the trends that we saw were people still bought shoes. They still bought the base core thing that they needed to exercise. But the specialty socks that they would buy, or, you know, the nice new shirt, or the running shorts, or the nutrition stuff, all of that we saw just completely die off, and the core of our business became just shoes. And what I took from that is that, yeah, I mean, people are still going to run, but they're going to change where that amount of money that they're spending goes to. So it's going to be just down to the core. I was a beer drinker at the time. I wasn't in the industry, but I can only imagine that those same concessions are made. You know, they're still going to drink their alcohol, but now you're looking at, like, what is the core of that? Maybe, you know, a special occasion with a higher price beer, a large format beer. Those things may have gone away in, you know, 2008, 2009, because people were looking for just like, I still got to get my booze, but what's the fastest track to get that with the least amount of impact on my dollars? So it's, you know, I align that with the running industry because that's where I came from, but I feel like it really did trend across all of that.
Yeah. Adam, you're chomping at the bit over here, I can tell.
I mean, there's just so many places to go here. One thing I wanted to touch on, this idea that, you know, it's all kind of doom and gloom nationally, and I don't think it's completely fair, because if you look at some other statistics, specifically from the Brewers Association, craft beer currently accounts for 12.8% by volume, but that's 23% of the dollars in the actual beer market. And so, yes, the top line barrels of beer produced is going down. And in the first session, they talked a little bit about, well, is there that magical, you know, number of barrels produced per brewer, and then the number of breweries that are out there. But you don't have to sell too many more craft beer barrels to actually equate to the same volume of dollars lost, right? And that's, you know, I'm not an economist, don't pretend to be one, but at least when looking at, you know, my own company's bottom lines, those are the kind of things that we think about. So that's something that I took a note about. You know, if you look at all of the kind of cities across the United States, San Diego, Denver, Austin, Portland, New York City, Boston, you know, these are all great, very dynamic, really diverse cities that have very dynamic and diverse populations, lots of young people, lots of old people. And these are the cities where we have these booming craft beer markets. So you look in Texas, we have 250 breweries, 60 of them are in Austin, 50 of them are in Dallas, 50 of them are in Houston. But then we actually still have another 50-something just peppered throughout the entire, you know, countryside. And so, yes, the demographics and the economics are certainly going to dictate largely how the future goes for our industry. But then you can also look at states like Colorado and Oregon, where their populace wasn't necessarily, super high earners per se. They come from all kinds of backgrounds, lots of blue collar work, and they're still big time craft beer drinkers. And the first beer job I had in the industry was in 2007, right outside of Washington, D.C., in Frederick, Maryland, working for what became the Flying Dog Brewery. And that brewery was really kind of the original private equity brewery. It was owned by a group of private equity guys, still is today. They've made a lot of really strange calls over the years, but we saw some of our strongest growth at that brewery while I was there during 2007, 2008, the beginning of 2009, which most of us in this room would argue were pretty poor times for the country. So I don't know. I took a few notes, and obviously you are an economist, but I'm not. I'm just talking about my experience.
Can I just follow up with what he said?
Absolutely.
So every year, our truest and most immediate threat is the liquor industry. And true to what you said about dollars, every year they have a Wall Street briefing, and their lead slide is always dollars. They don't get to volume, and they really don't talk about volume. They always lead off with dollars. And whenever our industry, the beer industry, leads off, we always lead off with cases or barrels. And it's amazing how they focus on the dollars. They focus on, what you take to the bank, and we focus on the barrels, which, I don't know, Craig has a great saying, you don't take cases and barrels to the bank and show up and say, hey, we got to deposit these, please. You take dollars. And when we get together as associations or as membership organizations or as conferences, we tend to always hone in on those cases and those barrels so quickly, when, like you said, dollars are part of the equation and should be so much more of the metric of our performance and our health, and we give it credit. So thank you, Adam, for bringing that up.
Lester, we apologize, and we from the media apologize for all the headline writing, all right? So a couple different things that I want to touch on there, and it's a great jumping off point for so many different points that I want to get through. We talked a little bit about how beer is losing to wine and spirits, and just want to mention this, that the Beer Institute had sent us over some information last week about a morning consult poll that found that only 32% of Americans prefer beer to wine and spirits. So this was wine and spirits in the form of a cocktail for spirits, liquor straight up, wine. 64% of the respondents in this poll, kind of, if you look at the pie chart, were in those two or those three groupings, liquor straight up, cocktails, and wine, and only 32% said that beer was their top choice. So obviously somewhat concerning for for the beer industry. And if you look at also just the market share, 1995, beer, of the total alcohol beverage market share, beer made up about 61%, and now it's under 50%. And we've got the Wall Street Journal, writing about how beer is done as a category and how nobody drinks beer anymore. And these are not great things for the industry. And my question is sort of, how do brewers and wholesalers work together to reverse some of these trends? Because it's not good if you're in the beer category and you're looking at some of these headlines.
Yeah, and I think it's a question that we should all be asking ourselves right now. And for my brewery, Hops and Grain, we opened in 2011, self-distributed for almost a year, and have solely relied on the relationships that we have with our wholesalers ever since then. Have great value in that, and wouldn't be where we are today without that. And one of the things that, for me at least, that I observe, because I love bourbon. I drink wine a lot with my wife. I drink beer a lot as well. But something that I continue to observe, at least in the marketplace, when you interact with, for HEB, like a beer and wine steward, and you discuss with them the way that beer is talked about versus how spirits and wine are talked about it's a completely different thing. Beer seems to be talked about as a more a story about this bootstrapped operation that came up, and and they're doing great things in this local market. Whereas wine is a little bit more presented as more a regional rather than attached to just a person. Obviously, you've got things like Robert Mondavi, and you've got some names that are out there. But for the most part, that isn't the most important thing, it seems, at least to a wine drinker. And then kind of the same thing with spirits. I mean, there are a few books out there about some of the greats in the whiskey world. But for the most part, beer seems to be more focused on the people that make it, and wine and spirits seem to be focused a little bit more about just the experience of drinking it. And from my vantage point, something that I would love to see, going forward is there are two elements that, as a new brewer that didn't, I don't have a background in beer. When I started a brewery, I had not come from working in a bunch of other breweries. But something that, that's been frustrating, it's probably the kindest way to say that, is the relationship that seems to exist between the two tiers that ultimately rely on each other for success has never been one that's viewed as more of a marriage, right? You don't go through, when you enter into a relationship with a wholesaler, you don't go through marriage counseling, right? You're not given these ideas of like, here's what the wholesaler wants and here's what the brewery wants, and let's talk about, before we even sign an agreement, let's really dive into exactly what that means. It's more led by annual business planning meetings and what happened last year and how can we maybe fix that going forward. Especially, you look at 2012, 2013 in Texas, wholesalers were grabbing any supplier that they could. And that created really, really crowded portfolios. I at least feel very fortunate that we opened when we did, because we were able to get in and hopefully continue to gain mind share with our wholesaler. But that kind of communication has never been there. It's been more, and I hope I don't piss off anyone in this room, but it's been a lot more of a parent-child relationship, or at least approached that way, as opposed to a mutual relationship between the two parties, right? Breweries have at least, and I only speak to the region that I'm in, but they've been treated more as we're gonna give you this opportunity to work with us, not a, hey, we want to grow our business by working with you. And through that, I think you develop a better rhetoric and storyline that you can go out to your retailers and tell, because the retailer is ultimately interfacing with probably someone on your team that's in sales, but more so they're interacting with the wholesaler. And if the message that they got early on was just like, they're just a part of our portfolio, not they're a part of our relationship and our family, I think it's really hard to get anyone on board who ultimately interfaces with the ultimate consumer. I'd love it if I could be at every single retail account, grocery store, liquor store, and talk to the people that are asking questions about our beer, but that's unrealistic. And so I would love to see that piece become a little bit more involved, because now it's hard for startup breweries to even get a wholesaler to sign them on. Regardless of how great your branding looks or how much experience you have in the industry. But I think there's a real opportunity for those two tiers to really start to increase our share of the category, because of the story that we tell collectively as a partnership, as opposed to there's tiers that we all have to talk about specifically that exist without each other and being involved.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Lesser, you were shaking the mic earlier.
Do you want to go? You made some good notes. Go ahead. While they're fresh.
I take notes because that way I can keep my head straight. But really, my business, we're a self-distributed brewery. 100%. We don't have any wholesale relationships, which probably gives many of the wholesalers in this room a tinge of discomfort. The reality is that we did not want to be a self-distributed brewer. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We truly believe that every wholesaler in this room could probably do the job that we do with their eyes closed and better. But on the other side, in Texas, we have very strong franchise laws. And when you sign with a wholesaler, it is de facto for the life of the business. Obviously, there are all kinds of different legal machinations that a brewer could go through to try to engage in that franchise conversation. But but realistically, for a small business with 2 employees and very little besides its brand asset, it's almost impossible to get out of that. So this idea of this parent-child relationship that Josh was kind of referring to is something that we see echoed throughout our industry, and especially at the legislative level, where the various wholesale organizations, of which some of them are here today, basically say, well, we let you do this, we let you do this. It was just from the goodness of our heart that we allowed this, and that's not true. They're smart business people, and I do respect that. And to Josh's point, in 2012 and 2013, there were a lot of wholesalers that were snatching up brands. And I think that the wholesalers who worked with our organization, the Texas Craft Brewers Guild, definitely saw a good business upside from that, because a lot of our members ultimately did go to work with them. And I think it was probably to the benefit of both the those wholesalers as well as the individual brewers. But this idea of a paternalistic kind of attitude, where does that work? It certainly doesn't work in any of our marriages. Try telling that to your wife. Well, I let you go to the store tonight to buy me dinner. Right? I mean, that's just such a kind of backwards argument. So I do agree with Josh, and the reason that we do have very strong franchise rules and franchise laws is that we are a branded business, and brands have value and brands matter. And I don't lament that for a second. And that's part of the reason why we are still a self-distributed brand or a self-distributed brewer, is because that brand does have value. However, that is something that we don't have the ability under Texas law to capitalize upon. We cannot sell you the rights to our brand.
Right.
However, a wholesaler can sell that brand to another wholesaler at no upside to the brewer. And I think it's very important to talk about that. I'm sure Lester has some opinions as well, but he let me go first, so.
I just got to backtrack to the morning consult story, because this is one of the things that really gets my goat. I usually don't recommend books to people, but if you read a book in the next month, I highly recommend you read a book called Everybody Lies by Seth Stevens. And this man presents the case that what we say versus what we do is very different. And when you come to a state like Texas, that well over 50% of the alcohol consumed in this state is beer. It's a great beer state, guys, and more than 50%. Around the country, we still own close to 49% of the ethanol sold in this country. We still own. Yet, Morning Consult can call up 1,000 people and ask them if they prefer beer, wine, spirits, and say, well, only a third of the people. And once again, it goes back to how do we explain our industry? How do we represent ourselves? And right now, we are. I'm watching, the Washington Post and the New York Times describe our industry to people, and we're adrift watching, people slowly peel away when we are still the preferred beverage of choice. We still own this alcohol beverage category, yet we act in certain ways like we're losing and we're failing and we're incompetent and we just can't do it. So going, who in this great world is defining our industry for us? And that really is what gets me. And when we sit down and we hang out the dirty laundry about, who's letting whom do what and how the business is run and what's the meaning of the 3-tier system and whether it's archaic and outdated and monopolistic and all these things, and meanwhile, we have this great industry that has created the best beer market in the world. I mean, Germans look back and say, gosh, you guys have great beer. When did that happen? They were the land of the great beer for so long, and today we are the land of great beer. So I think
But Germany drinks a lot more beer than we do.
Well, they're seeing a decline in consumption as well, just like we are. They're struggling.
So why do you think that is? Just in general.
This is economics.
Why are people drinking less beer?
It's economics, it's demographics. I mean, every country has its own story. I mean, I know the U.S. story very well on why people are drinking less beer and what has happened since 2008. We've seen so much change in both, the mergers, and the pricing environment and the closing of the gaps and the prices and all those things. I mean, these are all compounding effects. There's never one reason why something happens in business. I mean, we're just not lab animals where we can put the mice in a little cheese and see how long they run through that. And close the experiment. I mean, we are a living, breathing experiment that has multiple variables driving it in multiple ways, and we need to get our handle on it. We need to tell our story so much better than we're doing now.
So one of the ways that I think we can help overcome some of these challenges is by, creating experiences for people, and giving them something that they hold on to and they associate with long term. And right now, the way that that's happening is in the tap rooms, at the breweries, direct sales, pints over the bar, six packs to go. And that's kind of where I want to veer this conversation is, here in Texas, that's really confusing for the consumer. They walk into Josh's brewery and they can drink a pint of beer, but they can't take anything away, and or they can take something away. They walk into Austin Beer Works and they can have a similar pint of beer, but they can't take anything away, and it's confusing, and the experiences are different, and it's created a lot of frustration amongst brewers because you have different licenses and different quote unquote privileges that those licenses come with, and so I just want to kind of open up the discussion to this idea that maybe if we kind of remove the tiers and we remove the motivations behind the suppliers or the wholesalers or whatever it is, and we think about the consumer and giving them an experience that is memorable, would that help to begin to solve some of the challenges that the entire category is facing? And just kind of toss that out there.
Yeah, and this will just be a short one, and then I'll let Adam jump in. But one of the things that I've really tried to shift my mentality around. So we, just for some background, we were in Texas. We were licensed as a manufacturer up until December of last year, and we surrendered our manufacturing permit and then reapplied for a retail tier permit, which is called the Brew Pub license, which limits the amount you can produce per license location to 10,000 barrels, but it enables you to sell beer to go. Which for us, the facility that we were in, we couldn't make more than 10,000 barrels because we were capacity constrained. We were building a new facility, but knew that was a year and a half or 2 years out. So why not try to at least take advantage of that? It was an incredibly complicated process, getting those applications and rezoning and trying to get different uses for your space and blah, blah. I won't get into all that, but it was not a simple process. It was very expensive. But for us, we saw the upside of being able to operate in that way. But the framework that I tried to look at all of that was that, we talk about points of distribution a lot, and that's kind of like a badge of honor when you launch a new market, how many points of distribution do you have? But I loved on the first panel that we were talking about points of differentiation. And I think it's important to view every point of distribution as a potential point of differentiation, including a brewery's tasting room. I understand that for us, we had solely relied on our manufacturing license. We couldn't sell beer to go. We could sell a pint of beer on site. When we did finally get that brew pub license, I'm not going to then all of a sudden only sell the beer that we make on site. Because we still very much rely on every single one of those points of distribution that we have, that we rely on and invest in convincing the customers that are there to buy our beer, because we view it also as a point of differentiation. And we also do that in our tasting room. And we hope that, and I think you see this in every other state, that there are ways to not respect the relationship between a wholesaler and a supplier if you decide to do that and then just say, hey, we're only going to sell special beers on site and we're not going to distribute anything. That I don't think is healthy for the category at all. But in our particular case, we were able to create an environment in our tasting room with educating all of our taproom employees so that when someone did come in and buy a beer, we'd ask them where they lived, what part of town they were in, and then we'd list 15 different accounts that were in their neighborhood that sold a lot of our beer, so that when they did build their grocery list, they would go there and and pick up our beer, because we're not naive enough to think that every beer someone buys to go, they're going to buy directly from our brewery. But I think that's a huge thing that especially in Texas, as we continue to navigate through what happens legislatively is that we as an organization of breweries, we continue to talk about our tasting rooms as a point of differentiation that benefits everyone. Our wholesale partners, if we have wholesale partners, our sales reps, if we're a self-distributing brewery, because they're probably not getting paid or bonused on what we sell out of our tasting room. But we're existing across distribution and direct sales in our tasting rooms in a way that ultimately grow the entire category, because we are creating a new experience that wasn't there before. And call me crazy, but I would love to see wholesalers open up tasting rooms on site and showcase their entire portfolio and let people come in and get a flight of every brand that they sell. I would love to see that as someone who does rely on a sales staff with a wholesaler to really do that.
Yeah.
Is that even a reality? I have no idea, but I'd love to see it. And I hope that that's how we continue to view all of our facilities and the locations that we sell to is opportunities to differentiate the brands that we sell.
Well, nothing I want more than, getting a beer with a forklift driving back and forth moving boxes. I don't know about you.
Hey, but everybody loves taking tours, right? How about taking a tour of a wholesaler's facility? I'm not going to lie, like that is an incredible machine to see when you actually get to see that behind the scenes. And I guarantee you a lot of beer drinkers would love to hop on a golf cart and be able to ride through a wholesaler's warehouse and see how incredible that operation is. So
yeah. I've toured tens of wholesaler warehouses throughout the state. They are some of the more impressive operations in the state. They've got a lot of cool equipment. They've got a lot of tracking inventory and whatnot. I mean, it's really cool. And almost every one of them has a hospitality room to be able to bring their potential clients in, but also to be able to hang out and have beers at the end of the day with whomever within their staff. All the wholesalers I've been to have hospitality room. So imagine if they could turn that into a consumer experience as well. I think it's a great idea. I wanted to touch on something that Lester said, that the share of beer is shrinking, and it's really up to us to explain to consumers why they should enjoy our products. And who is the us? The us is all of us. It's all three tiers. It's the wholesalers, it's the manufacturers, it's the retailers. There's opportunities for all of us to work together to actually create that why, right? I mean, we heard in the first session that the wholesalers are going to inform manufacturers largely of whether or not it's a fad or a trend, right? And I think that information is extremely important, and it is a two-way street. But it's also important for the retailers to inform the wholesalers, the retailers to inform the manufacturers. I mean, there's all kinds of information that can be shared there. And the point really to make here is that the market itself is dynamic, but the system that governs the market is not dynamic. It is static, and it has stood largely static for many, many years. And I want everyone in this room to hear me say it, because Adam DeBauer believes it. The Texas Craft Brewers Guild believes it. The three-tier system is a very good and effective system to regulate alcohol marketplace. But if you look at it in all 49 other states and in Texas as well, you can actually see opportunities where that three-tier system has been updated to take into account the dynamic capacity of the market to be able to take advantage of those opportunities to let the market grow. Having the state say that it has to be this way in perpetuity, forever, ad nauseum, it's just not realistic, right? But we've seen it for winemakers in Texas, where they're able to sell their products direct to consumer for on or off-site consumption. We've seen it for distilleries in Texas, where they can sell their product for on or off-site consumption. We can actually see it for our modified retail members, which are the brew pubs. Retailers who have the ability to make beer at their retail establishment can sell it for off or on-premise consumption. Right. And so it's actually only manufacturing breweries in Texas that are the only ones who are denied this right. And we talked about this at length. This is not a bashing of the three-tier system, and it's definitely not a bashing of our wholesale partners in the state of Texas. But what it is it's a challenge that we need to take into account the reality that it's 2018 and we're still operating in a system that was conceived of a very long time ago, before all of us in this room were actually alive, and the updates have not come fast enough. And I think Lester would actually probably say that that is the great lamentation in most states, that it takes a very long period of time for legislative change to actually take place, and especially in a state like Texas, where our legislature only meets for 140 days every 2 years. And all of the state's business has to take place during that 140-day period, and nothing actually gets done for the first 60 days because none of the committees are actually appointed. And so all the legislators come to Austin and they party. And there's what you would refer to as intensive lobbying with hanging out and carrying on and trying to get your point across. And because there's so much work that has to be done in that remaining 80-day period, it's just beer, right? Why would it get the audience that it actually needs? Well, the reality is that we've got hundreds, actually thousands of very small business people here in the state of Texas. You know, we account for 2.5% of the market. There's no way that we're going to endanger the three-tier system when we're 2.5%. Heck, even if we were 10%, we're not going to endanger the three-tier system. We unequivocally support the three-tier system. It just needs to be updated to take into account the current market conditions.
Yeah, very well said. Lester?
Well done. So, and this is where we talked a little bit on the phone a little bit, and you know, and so I come at this from a national perspective, and I travel to a lot of states, and I'm involved in a lot of these discussions. And one of the things that does bother me is that the idea that it's stuck in time, it's archaic, it's monopolistic, and what we see is, you know, when we look at the legislative changes and the regulatory changes to the system, we've seen over 1,600 laws, regulations, rules change since 2012 in the three-tier system. Now, this covers, you know, the whole swath of regulation from state, local, to even municipalities, but the system is constantly being updated and changed around the country. And it is a state-specific thing. I mean, what works in Utah doesn't necessarily work in Texas, and what works in Colorado may not work in New Jersey or Delaware. And it is a state-based regulatory system where we all have to, you know, work together and figure out what's best based on that individual state. And there's no giant blanket we can just lay down over everything and make it everyone curl up and go to bed and sleep well at night. We're going to have to take care of every one of these markets as it's best for those individual states. Yeah. Does anyone know who Frederick Lauer is? Does that ring a bell? Give me someone raise a hand if they know who Frederick Lauer is from Pennsylvania. Okay.
Paul raises his hand.
I know, because I told him the story before I came in. Frederick Lauer is the first president of the U.S. Brewers Association. Okay? Back in the Civil War, brewers were busy in the halls of Congress lobbying and advocating for their business. Okay? They were fighting for over a $1 beer tax. And one of the little stories I read on the side, and I don't know if this is true, but you know, Frederick Lauer went down with the committee in the height of the Middle War and told the Ways and Means Committee that if they raised the beer tax, they would not make any beer. And back then, all your revenue came from beer taxes, okay? And the Ways and Means Committee, well, we don't have the beer tax, we can't fund the Army, right? So, I mean, historically, if you're in the beer business, guys, you are an advocate to the core. Not only are you capable of making really good beer, but you have a gene that's specially designed to advocate for yourself. And, you know, the Reinheitsgebot is, you know, way back in the Middle Ages, I mean, that was, you know, a pure play on regulating an industry. And, you know, that was way before any of us were even thinking about making beer. So we got to remember that this is a highly regulated market. It's regulated for a reason. It's regulated for a public safety reason. And I know people, we don't believe that because we're all 21 years older, there's no kids in the pipeline, and everyone's out to have a good time. But the reality is it still has the characteristics that define it as a regulated system. And it's not going to change just because we're impatient or we want it to change. It's going to take some time.
So I think as a brewer, I don't want to see. I mean, it needs to be regulated, right? I used to homebrew. Had a lot of friends that would come over and like drink beer for free, and I mean, observing cannabis as well. I mean, it's, you know, I think it's incredibly important that regulatory structures stay in place. And I think, you know, at least from my vantage point, I think there's so much opportunity for all of us to grow as a beer segment if we can listen and, you know, ask questions, actually wanting to hear the honest opinion from each of the parties that are involved in regulatory change, because I think that's what, definitely from a legislator's standpoint, they have no interest in two different parties bickering. Like they would love for all of us to come together collectively and say, this is what we want, because then they can do that. But if they're hearing, different sides and different opinions and different facts and, all those pieces, I think then the regulatory structure, it becomes like it stops. It doesn't do anything. We don't move forward. We don't modernize at all because we're all asking for different things. Whereas I think we could, ultimately come together, come up with what it is that's best for the entire, because we're all trying to make money as breweries. In my case, in hops and grain, we rely on our wholesale partners to be able to grow our own business. And we hope at least that they, have somewhat of a reliance on us to supply them with products so that they can continue to grow their businesses. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunity that hasn't been really utilized, especially in the state of Texas, to really grow that. Because if we came with a unified ask, I think most legislators would love, they would love that. They're tired of hearing us continually talk about all the different things that we want, and then they get to hear two different sides say that they want different things, and then they're like, well, where do we go from here?
All right. We've talked about a lot of different issues, and I want to kick it back to Lester real quick and just, kind of posit the question. In the markets where reform has happened, where the regulations have been modernized or updated or however you want to characterize it, to allow for, more direct sales from breweries to consumers, whether that's over the bar or for at-home consumption. Have there been any real negatives on the general marketplace? What is the argument for not reforming the regulations that surround that govern the industry and restrict certain tiers or certain licensees within a certain tier from selling directly to consumers? One of the ones we hear quite frequently is that it's pulling customers out of traditional retail occasions. But what are the arguments, sort of pro and con, and are there any clear examples where reform has happened and it's been an actual negative on the category in general?
I think Falling Rock out of Colorado is the poster child where he definitely came out pretty strong against Oscar Blues for what they did in the local market there on their street, because I subscribe to 2.5 gallons. I've looked at this data. I've beat this stuff pretty thoroughly, and we drink a pretty consistent amount of total alcohol per person per year consistently, and that comes down to 2.5 gallons of alcohol per year. And it really does set the stage for what a zero-sum game looks like. And, we do compete against wine, we compete against spirits, and we compete on and off premise. We have a very fragmented retail environment. That Yeti store at the corner of the Hyatt is, Lord forbid they start putting Yeti cans of beer out there with contract. I bet you next year they'll be like, holy cow. It's $5 a can. There'll be $4 Yeti cans out there if they get someone who has any any marketing sense, and then we'll all be drinking Yeti beer out of Yeti coolers. We got to understand that when we are in growing markets and we've got lots of young people coming in and lots of economic growth, and we don't really see that. But in other places where things are slowing down and bars and restaurants are closing and tap rooms are opening and brew pubs are opening, there is going to be tension. You're going to see that zero-sum game play out, and it's going to happen differently in different markets, and we're going to have different kinds of fights that, you're going to see licensed retailers, start doubling down and saying, wait a sec, you're pulling customers out of my bar. My bar's empty, and, we just had Diageo open a open gate brewery in Maryland. It's not far from where I live. It's, they want 3,000 people a year to go through there and have a pint of Guinness. Are they going to stop at the TGI Fridays outside the BWI airport now, or are they going to go right to Open Gate? How's that TGI? How's that restaurant? How are all those establishments around that facility going to feel when they see a drop in business because everyone's stopping by the Open Gate? And will they suddenly decide, what, I'm not putting Guinness on tap anymore because I don't want to have that relationship with someone who's stealing the mouth out. And some of those guys are chains, and some of those are going to be small independent retailers. It's yet to be seen, but I do believe in 2.5 gallons of ethanol per person. Opening up another establishment does not create more consumption. If you open up a new bar on the corner here outside of the Alamo Draft House, you are not going to increase consumption of alcohol in the city of Austin. You're just going to move it around, and that's.
You don't spend enough time in Austin.
I'll put my mic down now, but I let you guys comment. But I'm a firm believer that zero-sum game it's tough. I mean, we're in a very competitive alcohol, very mature market. It's not like we're introducing people to beer for the first time and it's a brand new product and it's tech savvy or anything. It's a well-established, well-known product. So
Sure.
We have great hurdles to overcome. And
well, you guys, at your breweries, the amount of beer that you're selling direct to consumers it's a drop in the bucket compared to what's being consumed across the state. I mean, I think, Adam, you told me at Austin Beer Works, it's like 600 barrels or something that you sold direct out of 20,000.
Yeah, I was going to do the math because I'm not good enough to do it in my head. But last year, we did 20,000 barrels in total production. That's actual, and by production, I mean actual sold. So roughly 275,000 CE, I think is where that came out. I'm not good enough to do the math in my head, especially with a beer in my belly. But we sold 600 barrels. If you look at our TABC tax paid, we paid taxes on about 900. I think it was 870 barrels that we paid tax on. Now, there are two reasons for that discrepancy between what we sold and what we actually paid tax on. Number one, we have unlimited beer privileges for our staff. We have 50 people that work at that brewery, and anyone can come in with their wife or significant other or husband or whatever and come in and have beers anytime they want to on the company. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but obviously they have to be under TABC, regulation. You can't come in and be intoxicated. You can't be intoxicated when you show up. You can't leave intoxicated. But we let people drink whatever, whenever. We also host charity events, and so we don't charge the charities for the beer. We don't treat that like a sale, but the barrelage actually goes through our tap room. And so I've actually seen some stats where they say, well, Austin Beer Works clearly sold 900 barrels at X dollars or whatever. It's just not true, and I'd be happy to talk to anyone about that who has specific questions. So far this year, we're tracking somewhere around 1,000 barrels. We've increased our days that we're open. We've increased our hours that we're open. We've added additional draws like a food truck. And we also have a pilot system. Now, the pilot system is not with the intent to cut out our retail partners, because our retail partners is where more than 95% of the beer that we make actually goes through. Our intent is to develop those next generation beers that become year-round brands or seasonal brands. And actually, if you look at our portfolio, we have a beer called Bloodwork Orange, and Bloodwork Orange has been on the market for almost 2 years at this point. We made a 7-barrel batch, 200 gallons, and it sold like in 2 days. Through the tap room, we were like, holy shit. We had no idea what was going to happen with a brand like that because, we didn't think that it would really get people excited, but it sure did. So we made another batch, and then it sold in 2 days. Then we made a 30-barrel batch, and we thought we were really going to do something, with that 30 barrels, and it sold out in a week. And we're like, well, okay, great. Then we made it a seasonal, and then it became a year-round beer, and it's still part of our year-round portfolio. Now, to be honest with you, I think that we've probably reached peak Blood Orange. That's my personal opinion. We're starting to see, the monthly sales dip just a tiny bit, but it's not percents, it's tenths of a percent. But I do want to touch on a couple of other little items here. Obviously, the Falling Rock in Colorado is a perfect example of where brewers who open up retail establishments directly next to their retail partners are going to see some negative, recoil, right? The reality is that none of us as manufacturers wants to truly be a retailer. We want an opportunity to be able to market our brands directly to our consumers, develop the market the same way that a wholesaler hopefully helps us to develop our market out in the market, right? And create those new brands so that when a wholesaler comes calling, we can say, yeah, we got all these things, and we've got this taproom brand. And Amy actually talked about this earlier today with their Berliner Weiss, which was a new brand for them and hit a home run with it, right? How else are we going to develop our company and our company's brands if we don't have an opportunity to get the real world feedback directly from our consumers? So this is not about being greedy, not about a money grab. This is about creating that personal experience between the consumer and the brand and us, right? Because the brand is really what matters when when talking about this. And I don't believe that it's purely a zero-sum game. Obviously, in free market economics, anywhere else in the world, the better we are at what we do, obviously, the more we're going to sell. And we see that in reality. We don't see Google, closing because Apple became $1 trillion business. Now, obviously, that's a crazy, stupid argument, and he's an economist, and he can talk about this. But it's up to all of us. If Hops and Grain were to open a brewery directly next door to me, they would immediately make me get tighter on my game. And in fact, this is something that we do all the time. They dropped Hayes County on us. We're like, holy shit, that's a great beer. And we dropped Flavor Country on them. And then it's like when you watch, heck, look at music. The Beatles put out the White Album, and then the Beach Boys dropped Pet Sounds on them. And the whole world's mind exploded, and everybody, all of us do better when we've got somebody who's kind of pushing us to be better at what we do. And I think the same is true with wholesalers, except that, we don't get to choose to move between wholesalers. So there's no opportunity to, make people better.
Yeah, competition breeds success.
That'd be my argument.
Yeah. Great points, Josh. I'll give you a quick an opportunity to quickly comment on that, and then I know we're butting up against time here. We're going to get kicked out of here soon, so a final question. But yeah, I want to hear your comments first.
Yeah, so we were very very hesitant when we opened the brewery in 2011. You weren't allowed to operate a tasting room. We couldn't sell a pint of beer. We built out a devoted air-conditioned space because we wanted to at least be able to show people kind of behind the scenes. As a new brewery, it's really important that your customers, and I think especially now more than ever, the millennial generation, those consumers, their dollars go to places that they feel connected to. And so for us, it was important that we could at least show a behind the scenes, even if it's just a window where you can look back behind there. Your dollars are spent in a place that you feel, like you were connected with. And then when you go to the grocery store, you still feel that connection, and that was important to us. When we did, move over to a brew pub license, it was very important for us that we kind of analyze our neighborhood and then all of our grocery store chains, and we price all of our beers higher than you could get them anywhere else around us, because we felt like that was important. And if a customer asks us why is a pint of beer here more expensive than right down the road, that's an easy story for us to tell, right? Because we rely on the partners that we have out at the retail tier to help us grow our brand. So it's really important that we do that. We don't do big brewery-only releases. If we package beer, we make sure that we allocate some for our wholesalers as well. But the fact of the matter is, SKU proliferation was a topic of just about every article you read, 2-3 years ago. And it's noisy for a wholesaler. A lot of us as brewers fail to recognize that we're not the only supplier in that wholesalers portfolio. We like to think that everything that we do is the best thing that they've ever seen and that they should focus their entire sales staff on it. But that's not the reality. The reality on the production side is that the staff that we have and the labor pool that we have, they want to be creative. They want to be able to produce different stuff. And that's not a reality to spit out a new product every single week to your wholesaler. But your tap room is an incredible opportunity to be able to let your brewers kind of flex their creative muscle, get the customers behind what you're doing, be able to tell the story. And then if those brands, as we've heard, I think on both panels, if those brands take off, then ultimately you've got a story behind that you can resonate with your customer base, and you can tell that to your wholesaler, like, hey, we've built this demand for this, and then we want to roll it out. On the second piece of that question, we have literally 100 feet away from us is an H-E-B right next to our brewery. They've always been an incredible adopter of the products that we sell, an incredible retail partner, H-E-B just in general. And if you're not, if you don't live here in Austin or in any of the markets that H-E-B exists in, they're incredible. And they are, I think, really the kind of the leading edge of what a grocery store chain can do with beer, wine, from a specialty standpoint, and they're fantastic. They're a huge percentage of our sales, and so that H-E-B right next door to us, when we finally were able to sell beer to go, it was a huge concern of mine that there were potentially going to be customers that wouldn't go to that H-E-B next door after they came to the tasting room because they could then buy a 6-pack of beer from us. So I tracked month over month sales in that specific H-E-B, and literally for 2 years before we even got that permit, they continued to grow. They were starting out, they were probably our 12th or 13th HEB across the company, and then they started, creeping into top 10, and they've continued to grow year over year over year, month over month, even this year. Now that you can buy literally a 6-pack that's, we keep the beer that we package, it's within a week of being packaged that we sell out of our tasting room. We have a great wholesale partner here in Capital Right, and so we get fresh beer in the market everywhere because of that great relationship. But that HEB continues to grow, and the fact that we can sell beer to go 100 feet away from them is in no way impacting anything that's going on there. We obviously, continue to try to commit to samplings. We try to commit to supporting that and making sure that they get all the fun brands that we also sell in our tasting room. But, that is just kind of obviously a one retail account story, but the fact that they're that close to us and we've seen no dip in sales from them whatsoever is, to me at least, that's a small testament to the fact that, one, as a brewery, you have to take responsibility for the fact that you do have relationships that can't be damaged with your wholesaler and your retailer partners. So if you're trying to just pull all that revenue back into your tasting room, then yeah, I think you should have places drop you. And if you try to open a tasting room right next to a bar and you're not even brewing beer there and you're just, presenting it as, your space, then yeah, if you're not treating them well, then they should drop your brand. But that ultimately comes down to all of us and viewing, again, going back to every point of distribution is a point of differentiation. And if you ruin those relationships, then guess what? That's going to be told to a lot of people in that bar that we don't carry hops and grain because they opened a bar right next to us. And that resonates with people, and they think about that when they go to the grocery store, when they go to the next bar. So I think it's a responsibility on all of our parts, but I think the trends are showing that it's not going to be as big of an impact as maybe has been theorized.
Yeah, well, everybody has a story to tell for sure. Final question before we get kicked out of here. We're going to play a little game that I just made up while you guys were talking called Christmas in August. So you guys are allowed to request one wish, one gift on your Christmas list. What would it be for you guys? I mean, it can be something local, one wish that you might have locally. It could be, Lester, something nationally that you might hope for. Christmas in August. We'll start with Josh. What's on your Christmas wish list?
I was going to jokingly say cannabis legalization in Texas, but we don't necessarily need to go there. No, my biggest wish is that we take away the differentiation between a retail brew pub license and a manufacturing brewery license, and just align those all together.
All right.
My biggest wish would actually be to have our wholesale partners, members of the Wholesale Beer Distributors of Texas and the Beer Alliance of Texas, to actually get with us and actually work with us. The Beer Alliance of Texas worked with us during 2013, less so the last two sessions, and personally, I would really like to see them come to the table, sit down with us, and just be reasonable and not have it be a super duper paternalistic, relationship, I think, as it has been in the past, because the reality is that we're a very, very small part of the market, and we want to work with our wholesale partners. I don't even have a wholesale partner, and I would like to work with a wholesale partner. And I think that's an opportunity here for a business like mine, where I count for 0.1% of the overall market, to continue to actually grow my business. And if I can do that with members of the Beer Alliance of Texas or the Wholesale Beer Distributors of Texas, I'm going to jump at that opportunity. So this is a challenge to all of y'all from either of those two organizations. Please come work with us. Well, we're not unreasonable people, and the sky won't fall because it hasn't fallen in 49 other states.
All right. Lester?
I want a pony.
You want to come sit over here, Lester?
I was kind of scared you're going to make me come sit on your knee and ask you. That's a good question. So I'm an economist. I am not in the trenches every day. I'm not selling beer. I'm not moving beer in trucks. I'm not brewing beer. As an economist, I sit back. I look at the socioeconomic, the demographic trends that shape this industry and are going to shape this industry and profoundly change it. And going back to what you said, it's not doom and gloom. It's change. And change is, it's not scary. It's great. I mean, what are we going to do with a third of the population running around with babies? Look how these guys treated their cell phones, for crying out loud. Can you imagine what they're going to do with their kids?
We're going to trade them in every year, or like, what do I?
Exactly.
I try to upgrade them.
How do I upgrade this kid, for crying out loud? No, for the industry, I really do wish that we stop looking back. I hear a lot of people talk about what happened in the 1990s and the 1980s. That wasn't a century ago. This is a new century and this is a new beer market. I'd really like us to start as an industry looking forward and thinking about how we're going to really sell beer and make beer a winning category in the 21st century and not wish for the 1980s again. We're just never going to put that genie back in the bottle.
Oh, well, it sounds like y'all are saying the same thing. I don't know about that, but thank you guys for coming out tonight, and I know we are way over time. Thank you to Dogfish Head and Orchestrated Beer and the NBWA for supporting us, and to Alamo Draft House for hosting us, and for all of you guys coming out tonight, and to all of our wonderful panelists. Thank you, and let's go have a beer. Cheers.